now, I kept hearing a strange little sound in the house, the kind that makes you want to summon an exorcist. It was not loud, but just enough to make me stop, listen, and completely doubt myself. Well, yesterday, I finally traced it to a storage tub in the loft. One of those plastic tombs where your old childhood memories, they go to sleep. Well, I opened it, and there, facing one another in the dark after roughly, 12 years or so in storage, were two Furbies chatting. My daughter, upon hearing this, would now like it formally noted that they are no longer hers. That somehow is only the beginning. This is Sunny from Muse Media, and this is the Daily Dozen, 12 developments from around the world worthy of your eclectic attention. You made it to Friday, folks. The work week is over. The lights are low. Does a Friday work week really even exist anymore? Do we still get as excited about Fridays as we used to? I mean, when everything was more industrialized, people would go to work at factories or, and then they'd go home. They'd have the weekends. But I don't know if work is like that anymore. But either way, I am happy. Thank God it's Friday. The lights are low. The attic toys are awake. Let's begin. So let us start where all mature civilizations eventually begin, with two demon-adjacent plush little robots holding a private summit in my storage bin. Furby, for anyone blessed enough to have forgotten, was one of the great toy phenomena of the late 1990s, designed to seem as if it were learning language, reacting to sound, and yes, speaking to other Furbies. That last part matters because the U.S. national security apparatus once looked at this furry little chatterbox and briefly thought, spy! The NSA banned Furbies from its premises in 1999 out of concern. Why would they have had Furbies in the NSA buildings in the first place? Out of concern, they might record and repeat sensitive information. I am driving my production manager absolutely crazy tonight. Okay. Even though Tiger Electronics publicly said the toy had no ability to record anything at all, which means one of the strangest tech panics of the late 20th century was not about malware or satellites. It was about a plush, owl gremlin-looking thing with a vocabulary problem. Now, from attic intelligences to afterlife planning, I did not expect to be talking about this. I didn't think it would become relevant in my adult life, but here we are. In Salt Lake City, a religious group called Summum offers modern ritual mummification for human beings. And this is not museum theater. Their own publicizing materials say the body can first go through ordinary funeral home viewing and services. Then it will be transported to Summum's sanctuary, where the mummification process begins. Their posted pricing lists the mummification service at around $67,000 before the sarcophagus, which can run from tens of thousands to well over $100,000, depending on how ornate you want eternity to look. And afterward, you are not placed on a mantle like a particularly ambitious houseplant. Their materials say the remains are sealed in a sarcophagus or casket and then placed in a mausoleum, sanctuary, or a cemetery vault. Well, I'll just say this. When my living energy has finally abated its physical form, I may now have an exit plan. The only obstacle appears to be financial, so I better get busy on the subscribers. From one of the strangest ways to honor the dead to one of the most ordinary, or at least it should be ordinary, in Calvin, Oklahoma, a husband and wife shop called Caskets of Honor makes custom vinyl-wrapped caskets, which I think that's pretty nifty. You can have racing themes, bright colors, personalized designs. The kind of thing that says maybe a burial box can reflect an actual life instead of a beige sales brochure. But Oklahoma law still treats the sale of funeral merchandise as something tightly controlled by Federal Service licensing rules. The state's Funeral Services Licensing Act defines funeral service merchandise to include the sale of burial supplies and equipment, and the couple's 2026 lawsuit says they were fined after trying to market their products at the state fair. Their argument is as plain as it is powerful. They're not embalming bodies. They're not directing a funeral or running a mortuary service. They are selling a box. And yet the regulatory burden they describe would push them toward funeral director licensing channels and full funeral establishment requirements. That's kind of crazy, which gives this story the shape of a very old American argument. A small town family business, a protected industry, and the question of whether regulation is serving safety or incumbency. Yeah. From boxes above ground to pressure building below it. About 300 miles off the Oregon coast sits the Axial Seamount, one of the most closely watched underwater volcanoes on Earth, while scientists have been tracking its seafloor uplift and seismic activity for years, trying to understand when it might erupt again. The latest official forecast notes that as of mid-March, Axial seemed to be taking what the researchers themselves called a kind of spring break. Uplift and seismic activity had slowed, and the expectation shifted toward eruption later in 2026 rather than immediately. So no, this is not a movie trailer thriller, volcano poised to explode on cue, but it is a real living system deep under the Pacific, still swelling, being monitored, quietly telling scientists what the seafloor is doing when no one is looking. And while the Pacific keeps building pressure offshore, inland, the ground already moved. On April 13th, a magnitude 5.7 earthquake struck Silver Springs, Nevada. It was shallow, but strong enough to be felt well beyond its immediate area. Across western Nevada and into parts of northern California, the USGS lists it as 5 kilometers deep, and reporting says the shaking reached places like Reno, Tahoe, Sacramento, and the Central Valley. What matters here is not just the quake itself, but the fault country it speaks for. The Walker Lane, that broad, underappreciated deformation zone through Nevada and eastern California that never gets the celebrity treatment of the San Andreas or the Cascadia. And that may be the real lesson. People tend to imagine hazard where the mythology already lives. But the Earth, as usual, does not care about brand recognition. So keep an eye on Walker Lane. From tectonic pressure to electrical appetite. For our tech piece tonight, a reminder that artificial intelligence does not float in some clean heavenly cloud. It sits in buildings, it consumes power, it emits heat a lot more than we first realized, and now it is drawing legal fire. The NAACP has filed suit over xAI's alleged use of unpermitted methane gas turbines tying to a major data center operation in the Memphis-South Haven corridor, arguing the project is imposing environmental harm on nearby communities, including predominantly black neighborhoods. That makes this bigger than a corporate legal headache. It turns the AI race into a much older question. When the future arrives, who gets the upside and who gets the exhaust? And now, because every Friday night deserves one guest from the botanical wings of the Addams Family, Mount Holyoke's corpse flower, Pangy, has bloomed again, and people have once more lined up to experience one of nature's finest acts of hostile elegance. The corpse flower is famous for smelling like decaying flesh. A strategy, not a malfunction, because that stench helps attract the insects that pollinate it. AP reports that Pangy's latest bloom drew crowds again this week, with visitors describing a bouquet somewhere between rotting meat, sulfur, and a dirty diaper left to contemplate its choices in the sun. How disgusting. In other words, a floral event hosted by none other than Morticia Addams. and from one strange society to another. New research suggests that in at least one laboratory naked mole rat colony, queen secession occurred peacefully rather than through the aggression and social conflict that are usually expected when reproductive hierarchy breaks down. Naked mole rats are one of nature's most bizarre and rigidly structured societies. So, when a study turns up, a handoff of power, it gives you a thought worth carrying into the human world. Not every succession needs to become a blood sport. Sometimes even a deeply hierarchical system contains a more graceful contingency than the mythology suggests. We can sure learn a lot from animals. And from animal politics to the state of your own overworked noggin. A Science Advances study tracked 184 students over 12 weeks and found that day-to-day fluctuations in cognitive sharpness predicted how well people set and completed their goals. On sharper days, they aimed higher and followed through better. On foggier days, they did not. Researchers estimate that swing can amount for roughly 30 to 40 minutes of productivity in a day. And maybe that is one of the kinder findings of the week, because some days are not moral failures. Some days are just lower precision days. Sleep matters a lot. Burnout is important. Mental bandwidth is finite. So maybe the lesson is not that we are lazy when we stall, but that we're not machines, and anyone still pretending otherwise has never had to answer email on a Thursday. Speaking of the body refusing to be a spreadsheet, if you woke up every morning feeling like you spent the night gargling drywall dust, that may be common in older adults, but it's not something to wave away automatically as just age. Current reviews show dry mouth in older adults is strongly linked to medication burden, and it can also point toward mouth breathing or sleep apnea, dehydration, diabetes, and autoimmune diseases. That does not mean every dry mouth is a medical emergency, but it does mean the mouth is often tattling on something else. So keep the water by the bed, but maybe also look at your medication lists, your sleep quality, what your blood sugar is doing, and whether the body has been whispering a little more urgently than anyone is realizing. And after all of that, graves, glands, governments, turbines, and talking attic relics, let's look upward. The Lyrid meteor shower is now active, and NASA says it will peak around April 21st into the 22nd, with dark enough skies this year to make the display worth stepping outside for. And if you don't already know, I do a Saturday show called Skywatch Weekly. So if you like amateur astronomy, make sure you look for that upload on Saturdays here at this channel. The Lyrids are one of the oldest recorded meteor showers in human history. It's been watched for something like 2,700 years, long before electricity bills, data centers, or the realization that one's home may contain operational Furbies. I am not going to let that story go away soon. NASA's April Skywatch Guide also notes Mercury shining especially bright this month and a comet making an appearance, but the Lyrids are your cleanest invitation, a reason to stand in the dark, get a little campfire going, let your eyes adjust, and remember that the sky still keeps an older calendar than the one on your wall. And for our final story tonight, something gentler. At a sanctuary called Uncle Nell's Home, there's a blind cow called Helen who spent 19 years on a dairy farm before finally being taken in somewhere built around patience and sound, touch, and trust. She had to learn the world differently through voices, wind chimes, routine, safety, and kindness. And according to both the sanctuary and outside coverage, that is exactly what happened. Helen, once frightened and uncertain, gradually settled into a life where she now leans into the affection, nudges the people who care for her, and moves through her days with the calm of a being who has finally found the place where fear stops ruling the room. Maybe that is the closer for tonight. Not that the world has gone soft, because clearly it has not, but that even after long years in the dark, being used and abused, a life can still open its soul. A creature can still find peace, and kindness, quiet, beautiful kindness still counts for something enormous. And that concludes your Daily Dozen. From attic Furbies to mummification, custom caskets to underwater volcanoes. We've talked about the Nevada fault lines and AI exhaust, corpse flowers and naked mole rat diplomacy, your mental sharpness to grandma's dry mouth, and from meteor showers to Helen, the world remains what it always has been. Part measurements of warning, absurdity, mystery, tenderness, and invitation to pay closer attention. Get some rest this weekend. Step outside if the sky is clear. And if you hear something softly muttering from the loft, maybe do not open the tub alone. Follow the signals, question that noise, and I'll see you again on the night side.